Hello, everyone. I am Sara Moses, the host of the Do It Now podcast. And I'm really, really honored today to be interviewing Julie Trainer. She is the host of the Hidden Gifts of Loss podcast. She has also created a community by the same name. And I am just very moved by the work that you're doing, Julie. I think it's really incredible that you're opening up a space and a place for people to have conversations around loss and death and grief, and just this possibility that there might be positive things that can come from loss. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and I want to welcome you today.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here, and yeah, it's an honor to be doing this work, and it kind of feels like a calling.
That is an incredible word to describe the work you're doing. And so I need to find out what inspired this work. How did you first feel this calling? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Sure. Well, so it all kind of began in 2020 when, in January of 2020, when I found out that my mom had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Mm.
And immediately I knew that I would fly out to California to take care of her. And I live in Ohio. So I went out on Valentine's Day and I spent 10 weeks with her and helped her die, basically.
Mm.
And the thing is, I'd never been around anyone really actively dying. I'd never had a really life altering death before,
Mm.
outside of grandparents, but not, someone where it really affected me so deeply as my own mother. And
Mm.
when I came home from that, the only thing that really helped me with grief was talking about it.
Mm.
So I started thinking that, yeah, I would like to create a space for other people to talk about it because it, would be a good way to be of service. And I also really enjoy hearing other people's stories.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Well, two things come to mind immediately is that you wanted to create this space. I think it's really important because it is sort of a taboo topic sometimes, and we don't know whether we can talk to people about it. But you used a term that I want to ask you about. You said the word life altering death. Can you, I think I know what that means, but can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. And that term, I don't know if I made it up, but it came to me. I didn't hear it anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But, excuse me. So I'd been through other deaths. Like I said, I mentioned my grandparents. All four of my grandparents had already passed, but they weren't people that I spent every day with. They were people that I saw maybe every other summer for a couple of weeks. So, of
Mm-hmm.
course I loved them,
Mm-hmm.
but my mom, it was, I mean, it was my mom,
Mm.
and that was just like losing a piece of yourself, really.
Right.
And that, and also it wasn't like, oh, I showed up and I went to the funeral when it was over. It was like, no, I was there with her every day, watching her go from somebody who could drive to the store to watching her become somebody who basically couldn't speak and was just, in bed and
Mm.
in pain and miserable. So it was life altering, not just because I lost her, but it altered something about me, like
Mm-hmm.
about who I was.
Yeah.
And yeah, for a year, I was someone who was grieving and just really kind of confused. I knew I was different, but I also just didn't know who I was for probably about a year.
Wow. I can only imagine what that must have been like. And it, because it's more than the grief, you were also with her, it sounds like, all of the days and weeks leading into this sort of transition from her, right? From, so
Yeah.
can you describe what that was like? Because in some ways, I can imagine it must have felt good to be there for her, but was it also incredibly painful for you to watch her decline?
It was pancreatic cancer. I've been told is like the most painful cancer
Mm.
because what it does is you don't know that it's there. Your pancreas is really small and it's kind of hidden away. And by the time you have symptoms, it's usually already too late
Mm.
because what it does is it starts pushing out on all of your other organs. So she'd had a stomach ache for a couple of years actually, and
Mm.
nobody had diagnosed what it was. She was already a breast cancer survivor.
Mm.
We all thought it was stress because my mom was a big worrier. She worried about everybody and everything. So nobody knew what it was. Yeah. So to watch her decline, I mean, it was incredibly sad, and it was challenging because COVID started right after we met her hospice team, and I was staying in my parents' house, which is 800 square feet. Not a place I had ever intended to live again. And it was challenging because my dad was there, but he was not helpful in any way. The saving grace was that I had my daughter with me, and she and I helped. As soon as COVID happened, then we did everything. We didn't even really get the hospice visits in as frequently as we were promised. Everything was non-emergency, was all just done by phone. So to watch my mom just sit in her rocking chair and with her hands on her stomach and go from she loved my mom. She loved to go out for coffee. She loved to go shopping, just all those little things that you take for granted. And when I first got to California, originally I was only going to stay for 10 days. Well, then she had the port surgery where they were going to put the chemo. The chemo was a long shot, her oncologist told us. And that port surgery took a lot out of her. And then the chemo, actually, in some cases, the chemo can make you worse, and it did. There's something called your cancer markers, and I scientifically cannot explain that, but hers went from about 700 to about 3,000 because of the chemo. And it was just like such a quick downhill.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
That.
I lost my mother-in-law to pancreatic cancer, and so I'm very familiar with how painful it can be, and for the person, and I can only imagine how this must have also affected your daughter to be seeing this at a young age. So can you take us from what must have been a very painful, very dark place to the place that you are today? It's sort of, I feel like you traveled over a bridge and you came up with this idea of the hidden gifts of loss. So can you tell us a little bit about that and the podcast that you started?
Sure. So, well, interestingly, almost a year to the day later, my dad died too. And my brother and I went back to California. We had to clean out and sell their house. So hidden gift number one was that our parents left us some money. So after I came back home, I worked at my corporate job for about another year. I hated my corporate job, by the way. And I kind of got liberated from that. And then the other gift that I had was, well, there were hidden gifts while I was there.
Okay.
My mom's friends showed up. In the middle of the pandemic, someone bringing us a Starbucks was a hidden gift, right? Right. My daughter being so young and so afraid of everything that was going on with the pandemic, like a germaphobe, not to a level that I'm not at all. So she was pretty freaked out too. And then when I came home, I had an end-of-life doula. Now, she was a huge hidden gift because I didn't really know that was a thing. I felt that I was an end-of-life doula because I knew what a birth doula was, but I didn't really know that it was a thing, right? Okay. And when I discovered this, I got to speak with this woman, Roxanne, every week for an hour for 12 weeks as part of her internship. Okay. And that just took me from just kind of being stuck in grief to really starting to heal. That was the first part of my healing. And it was because she listened, and she would tell me that my stories were amazing and that I should share them. And I felt really encouraged by that. And my first idea for the podcast was going to be called Talk to Me About Death, because I had become this person that all I talked about was death. That was it. You know?
I'm glad you didn't stick with that title. I mean,
I'm glad too. I know, right?
There's a lot of clarity
That's where I was, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I also had been journaling through this whole thing and working on this memoir, and just little things just started to shift. Like I started deliberately, I said, focus on one good thing. If that's all you can do today, focus on one good thing. And that was, I think, the first thing that helped me. And even when I was at work and I was unhappy, I'd be like, okay, focus on one good interaction that you got to have with someone today. And I would journal about that stuff. And then I had that idea for the podcast because of what Roxanne said, talk to me about death. But I had
Right.
just put that on the back burner. I'm like, well, how do I start a podcast? Who's going to listen? Right. All those things.
Right.
Well,
All
then
the
fast forward, right, to someone we both know and love,
yes.
Stacey Lauren.
Yes.
And I did her challenge called Find Your Voice. And
Mm,
one night I posted something about my mom and she said, this is so good. You should start a
mm,
podcast. I'm like, all right, the universe is talking to me
right.
now.
Right.
Basically, I am being called
Yeah.
to start this podcast.
Mm,
Like I raised my hand and the universe said, this is what you're doing. And through that, oh my gosh, I can't even tell you, like hearing other people's stories and then finding out that there is a whole bunch of hidden gifts of loss and everybody's are different. But it's like
mm.
Stacey said I was a disruptor. She's like,
Oh,
you're paving a way for people to look at this differently.
yes.
And my in my heart, my hope was that if somebody is like in grief the way that I was, but they maybe hear a story of, well, this, you will come out of this
Mm-hmm.
and you will see things differently. And they'll think, okay, it doesn't feel like that to me now.
Mm-hmm.
But if it happened to these people, maybe I
Mm-hmm.
have something to look forward to.
Mm. It's so
Something like that.
beautiful when you were talking about just look for one good thing in the day or in the conversation with someone. That's such an incredible skill, and it's beautiful that you took it or found it in this time of darkness and really leaned into it. I think that's an incredible lesson for people to know. So you started then, it looks like you were looking for good things and then more and more things started showing up, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking for the hidden gifts and
Oh.
I was noticing little things that might just seem coincidental or insignificant, but
Mm-hmm.
I believe in signs and symbols.
Mm-hmm.
So when I would see these things, I would take it as a hello from my mom,
Yes.
or a sign or
Yes.
little things like that. And there were so many of them. It's hard to think of all of them. But
Yeah.
I could share one little one that just
Okay.
popped into
Yes.
my head if you
Yes.
want.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things about my mom was how much stuff she had. My
Mm.
mom couldn't pass up a clearance sale, and it didn't matter if she needed the thing. It didn't matter if the shoes were comfortable. It didn't matter if it was on sale. She was going to buy it.
Okay.
So consequently, her garage was floored to rafters with color-coded Sterilite bins of stuff. Hidden gifts, because most of them were gifts she bought but didn't know who to give them to, or gifts she'd been given
Oh.
and was going to regift. And to keep herself from regifting to the same person, she would put a little piece of masking tape on the bottom of everything, and it would say Merlene Christmas 1999. And it's just I start going through these boxes and I'm just dying. I'm like, oh my god, mother. It's like really.
Oh, this is
so
incredible.
so one of the things, yeah, so one of the things she used to say to me, and this was even before she got sick, she'd say, now, Julie, someday when I'm gone and you go through all my things. Okay, now right there's a problem, right? Why do I
Right.
have to do it?
Oh.
Why don't you do it, right? Well, I'm
Right.
busy. I'm going to Laughlin with my friends and blah, blah, blah. So she kept saying, so she'd say, I want you to find this ruby and diamond ring that,
Oh.
my Aunt Margaret gave me when I was little. It's out there in the garage somewhere. I was like, yeah, needle in the haystack. Sure, I'm going to find that. I never found it in her garage, but uh, last summer, I was cleaning out my garage because I don't want to leave all that stuff for my daughter. Now, I don't
Right.
have nearly as much stuff as my mom, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was taking a truckload of stuff to the thrift store, and I saw this jewelry box. And I'm like, oh God, I'm sure I don't want anything in that jewelry box. It's all old and decrepit looking. But I opened it up. There was this diamond and ruby ring
Mm.
from the 1940s. And all along, this little gift was in my garage, and I had
Yeah.
never seen it before. I don't know how it got there. And
Wow.
what that makes me think of, not only was my mom like in the garage with me saying hello, and I still get chills when I talk about it, but it's like we all have that little diamond in the rough inside of us,
Oh.
right? And we don't even know it's there until
Mm.
something opens the lid. Like I
Mm.
opened the lid of that jewelry box,
Oh.
and there it was.
Wow, this is beautiful. And I love that she sort of sent you on this hunt for a ruby and diamond ring because I'm sure when you didn't find it in her garage, you figured it's got to turn up one day, someday. So it's this idea also of us just remembering that there are beautiful things hidden for us out in life. We have to be looking for them. I love that your mom left that message with you to look for this ring. And tell me, was there anything else that you found that really surprised you or made you laugh or was just a big surprise?
You know, okay, this is another, it's kind of another along the same lines, right? So my mother, she overgifted. All of us over the years were like, Mom, you've got to dial it back.
Right.
We just don't need to get a huge box like this for Christmas with stuff I don't know what to do with, right?
Yeah.
But after she was gone the first Christmas, it was really hard because I'm like, I'm not going to get that box,
Oh.
now I want the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so my daughter that year was really excited about Christmas, and she said, "Mom, if no matter what comes in the mail, don't open it." She doesn't live with me now, so the fact that she was here was really special too.
Mm-hmm.
So Christmas morning, she's like, "You have to open your box first." I opened my box, and what my daughter had done was she took a mailbox, a USPS mailbox, and she
Mm-hmm.
addressed it to me in my mother's handwriting. And when I opened the box, all the gifts my daughter had created for me were the same types of gifts that my mother would send.
Oh,
Every year
wow.
she sent a Starbucks holiday blend coffee, and she'd send holiday handhelds. I cannot tell you how many holiday handhelds I have. I have holiday handhelds for St. Patrick's Day. And I mean, who needs that, right? But like she wrapped it up. And then the other thing my mom would do was she put little sticky
Oh,
notes on all the gifts, kind of explaining what they were for. Like one of them would be like a little bag of, like chip clips, things that
yeah.
you clip a bag shut with. And on the sticky note, it would say always useful, and you're like, well, obviously it's useful, right? So
You're,
my daughter put little sticky notes on everything. And like,
oh, oh,
I was so blown away because like that was like a gift
yeah.
from my mom that came through my
Yes.
daughter,
Yes.
you know?
This is beautiful, and your mom is sounding like quite a character. I'm so glad to learn more about her today. And this makes me think with all these beautiful stories that there must be a book in here somewhere. Is that something that you're also working on?
Yes, there is a book. There is a book sitting in about 50 Google Docs right
Okay.
now
Okay.
that I have been working on. And now
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten very busy with the podcast too.
Mm-hmm.
And the current idea that I have is to take the stories from the people that come on my podcast and make them into an anthology book. I just think that would be so cool.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's a
You
wonderful
know?
idea. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because there's common themes through all of these stories I'm starting to see. And there's like I don't know. I get a lot of ideas and then it takes me a long time to manifest them. That's
Right.
kind of how my
Okay.
brain has always been, right?
Yeah.
But I see that as being like you could have the pandemic stories, the loss of
Right.
your mom stories, the loss of
Mm-hmm.
spouse stories,
Mm-hmm.
pet, you
Mm-hmm.
name it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just going to
Yeah.
ask what the themes are that you've been seeing, but it sounds like that's you just listed them. That's incredible, and I think it's such an amazing way for people to be honor the family member that they lost or the pet that they lost and put into words what that was like, because there might be someone else out there who doesn't have the ability to do that. They almost can't put what they're feeling into words. So then when they get to read it, it must be sort of healing for them. Have you found that to be the case?
Yeah. Yeah. One woman who came on my show had never, she said she had never had the opportunity to tell the story of losing her. He was her ex-husband, but they were still really close. Never had the opportunity to tell that entire story from beginning to end. And it had been a couple of years since he was gone. And I thought, oh my gosh. She's like, thank you so much for giving me that opportunity. And
Mm-hmm.
that just touched my heart because that's what I wanted it to be. So when you
Yeah.
see something that you've only had in your mind
Mm-hmm.
come to life,
Mm-hmm.
it's really gratifying and humbling,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I was touching on at the beginning is that for many of us who have had a lot of loss in our lives, we almost start to think that we shouldn't talk about it to anyone because it might be depressing or negative. We don't know how people are going to receive us talking about it. And so that's what I meant when you're saying, yes, it's okay to talk about it. Not only is it okay, but you're invited to talk about it. You're celebrated when you talk about it. We're going to memorialize them on this podcast or in this book. This is important work. This is what I'm talking about is you're completely flipping the scenario as to, we can't talk about this, don't talk about this, it's negative, to actually it can be incredibly healing. And also, let's go deep diving for the gifts. Let's go look for them. I just really love what you're doing, Julie.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Oh.
Yesterday, I had a woman on my show, and she talked about how she is continuing her relationship with her husband since he passed. And she's doing it very intentionally. She meditates every night for an hour, and he comes to her. And I loved how she's written a book too that's coming out in the fall. It's called Together Still, I think.
Oh, beautiful.
And I get to hear these stories. Like, people share these stories with me, and it's just amazing. I just had another woman reach out. I don't even know where she heard about me from, but she asked if she could come on and tell a story about her son's brain tumor and the what they went through and the gifts that they found together. And it's just blowing my mind. And I love this woman's story about continuing those bonds, because she said, well, what was it? She said, where in the society did I get the idea that that was all in my head and that wasn't real? She said, it's just as real, if not more real, than anything that happened when he was in a physical body. And I feel like that's such a message of hope, because that's one of the things in loss. It's just, there's this big hole in your heart, where that person was.
Yes.
And when you feel a little thing like, here's the ring I told you to find, or, just a little hello moment like that.
Yes.
It's like, oh, wow, I'm not imagining this at all. That person is there in a different form.
Yes.
And I'm not alone without them.
Yes. And I think it's beautiful when you talk about it. It lets others of us think that, I'm not crazy. Maybe when I think of, in a moment in the day, I'll think, oh, I have to go call my dad. And I'll think about my dad, and it takes me, I'm almost walking towards my phone before I remember, oh, I can't call my dad. My dad's not here anymore. But then why do I feel him so present? And I go through these thoughts in my mind, and I say, well, the reason I feel him so present is because in this moment he was visiting me, and his was a very painful loss because, as you mentioned, it happened during lockdown. He didn't die of COVID. I believe he died sort of a broken heart because he was in a VA hospital. He was denied any visits. And so my brother and sister, who lived very close by, used to visit him every week. I used to go down as often as I could. So imagine for months, nobody visits you and he doesn't really understand. And then we lost him. And so, yeah, it's been hard, but is it okay if I share my little hidden gift of loss in that
Please.
story?
Oh my gosh, please. Yes.
Okay, so I've never really shared this before. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but during that time, you were not allowed to visit a relative who was in any kind of assisted living or VA hospital. And so my dad was not allowed any visitors. And I think, I don't have the timing exactly right, but it was somewhere between 5 and 6 months. And then we got a call from his nurses that he was going to be passing, they thought, within 24 hours. And normally that would just be to share the information with you because you weren't allowed to visit. You weren't allowed to say goodbye. But my dad was really, really funny and charming. And he had been so funny and sweet with those nurses for the last 3 years that he'd been living there. And my sister and my brother and I had visited, and he was just a charming, funny man. So these nurses really were fond of my dad. So when they made that call, they said to my sister, we're going to break the rules and we're going to sneak you guys in. And they did. And when I think back of the 15 minutes that I was allowed, I was snuck in and I got to spend 15 minutes with my dad. When I think of that, what a gift, and my heart hurts for the other people, and I hope that we never, ever go through that again in our history. But the funny thing was that, or the gift in it was that my last 15 minutes with my dad, he was making me laugh. He had lost the ability to speak, and my sister had warned me of that. But when I came in, I don't know why I had stopped and gotten him a milkshake because she'd already told me he couldn't swallow. But I brought him this milkshake and I just wanted to because I used to bring him treats. And he started to sip on the milkshake and he was actually able to swallow. And I said, "Oh, Dad, do you like it?" And he goes, "Next time, bring chocolate." Because I had brought vanilla. And it was just so funny. And then like he was telling me next time, and I'm thinking next time we'll be in heaven, but I got the note. And then he was able to talk on speakerphone to both of my daughters and say goodbye. And I just thought, what an incredible gift. I'll remember that forever. I'll remember his humor. I'll remember that the last 15 minutes that I was ever with him, he was still making all of us laugh. So I'm sorry I went on that long tangent, but it's
Don't be
just,
sorry. That's so
yeah.
beautiful. I love that. You got that 15 minutes. Wow. Like he kind of arranged that for you, you know,
Oh,
by being himself, just by being that charming, funny man, like his
oh,
spirit almost like went ahead and was like, all right, I'm going to make sure Sarah gets to be here and I get to say goodbye. And the milkshake, something told you to go get a milkshake. I mean, how funny. I'm sure that's not your usual thing is
no.
pulling into a
I
McDonald's.
did. It was in McDonald's. You're right. It's so sweet that you just said that back to me that he created that. And I hadn't thought about it in that way. I think you bring this out in people. You're very good at, because I've never shared that story before. So thank you for giving me this time to do that. So you're
Thank
doing
you.
that for a
Yeah.
lot of people, right? On your podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems to be what's happening through me. I just kind of show up and people just tell me their stories. It's so fun. I mean, I love it. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's not sad. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's bittersweet because we lost these people, but when you can see those little the beauty, sometimes you can't see it at first. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you definitely can't see it when you're in it.
Right.
You know, it's just but then later when you look back, you're like, oh wow, okay, that's what that was.
Mm-hmm.
Dad set that up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm
Oh,
thinking it must be different for everyone, but have you found there's a certain amount of time of grieving where people are able to, I want to say, surrender a little bit, let go, and find the hidden gifts in loss?
yeah, I can't really quantify it
Mm-hmm.
as far, but for me, it's been 4 years now, and I'm not grieving. I would say that I am not grieving. Like I'm really thriving right now. The woman that I spoke to, whose relationship is continuing with her husband, she said the same. It's been 4 years, but she said for the first two, she just didn't know who she lost herself. She said she felt like she just lost her identity completely.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like kind of fresh grief is going to be different for everyone, but I feel like people who've just lost somebody probably aren't going to want to talk about it on my show. You
Right.
need some time and you need to give yourself grace. You know, when people say, "Oh, you know, move on," just I have a friend who lost her mother unexpectedly, and
Mm-hmm.
she's African American. She took her mother to the hospital for a stubbed toe. She told me that African Americans often don't receive the same kind of care in hospitals as Caucasians. And we wouldn't be aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not our experience. She said, no, we're terrified to go to the doctor. And what happened was they decided, oh, her mom was a tough old broad. She could handle Oxycontin, and she couldn't. He
Oh,
gave it to her anyway, and that's what killed her.
oh, wow.
So when she tried to pursue like legal,
Mm-hmm.
recourse, she was told, well, doctors have to practice on somebody. It's just completely infuriating and unacceptable. And about 3 years later, she was at this derailed her son going to college because her mother had lived with them,
Mm-hmm.
and she said her mother was her best friend,
Mm-hmm.
and he was really struggling in just to get his footing. And the doctor said, well, how long ago was it? And he said 3 years. And he's like, well, that's long enough. You should be over it. Like, why should we be over it?
Mm-hmm.
That's not right.
Mm-hmm.
It takes how long it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think
I'm
anybody can speak to that for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. I'm really, really glad you spoke to that. I say that to people all the time because I do some counseling and other things. And when one family member gets upset because another family member is taking longer to grieve, I just always have to stop everybody and say, grief is different for everyone. I have a friend who lost her husband suddenly and unexpectedly to a heart attack, I think 10 years ago, and she is still struggling. And it's been hard for her. She's lost some friends who have sort of said, "What's wrong with you? You know, move on, get over this." And she's still heartbroken. And I just honor her and how she feels because they had a beautiful love. You know, I think that's the message is just respect everybody and give them grace that we have no idea what they're feeling inside and let them have as long as they can. But I like this idea that you're talking about, that we can have hope, that those feelings can change into something else. And maybe the idea is if we start looking for the hidden gifts, and that's what you're saying, like be intentionally looking for the hidden gifts, that maybe that will help them move from grief to a better place.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. I hope so. Yeah. I know that is what helped me, was being able to see those things. And yeah.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
Julie,
I know.
this has been beautiful today. I love that we're having this conversation. Can you tell us about, is there anything else you're working on? I know you're working on a book, an anthology. You got your podcast going. What other exciting things is Julie Trainer doing?
Oh
Oh,
my
can you
goodness.
talk about your community a little bit? I really want to talk about that before we leave today.
Sure. Yeah. So my community is Hidden Gifts of Loss on Facebook, and it's a place to just support each other. It's a place for people who've been on the podcast to go and make connections. It's I like to feature who's ever just been on the podcast when I publish that episode. And what's just recently happened that was interesting was that a woman posted that had lost her very best friend literally like the day before, like unexpectedly. And she said, "I can't post anything about this anywhere because the family wants it kept secret. So just thank you for being this place." So it's growing in a way that I didn't expect. You know, it's almost like nobody is more surprised than me that this is like kind of taking off and building, and it just really,
Oh,
it's humbling. You know, it's humbling. Just I don't know what that meant to her to have a place to post, but I'm so glad that I was able to provide that.
it's really amazing because I'm a part of this community, your community, and I'm a part of a few other private Facebook communities as yours is because of the many, many losses I've had in my life. And I have to say, yours is the only one that has this feeling of being uplifted, and there's a very positive connotation. Even when someone is posting something like that, we all like gather around and we all look at all the positive things of, wow, this is amazing that she has a safe place to be heard and to talk about this. And a lot of the things that we talk about or you talk about in the community is uplifting. And I just wanted to share that with everyone who's looking for a place, a community that's safe, that's private, that you can come and talk about the deaths, the loss, the tough things in life. So we will make sure that all of the listeners can find you, Julie, the Hidden Gifts of Lost community, which is a private community on Facebook, the Hidden Gifts of Lost podcast. And I really hope that I can invite you again when your book comes out. Is that okay to do?
Me too. That would be amazing. I would love that.
Oh, wonderful.
Motivation to
Yeah,
keep working on that book.
wonderful.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Well, thank you for your
Thanks for
time. I
having
want
me.
to thank all of my listeners everywhere for being with us. And I want to encourage you to go out and whatever your big dreams are, do it now, do it now, do it now, because the worst thing you could do in this lifetime is not become the person that you could be. Thank you.
Thank you.